censorship. Censorship is the crux of controlling people in democracy. If you can't say something, then you can't identify that as a problem. And if you can't identify that as a problem, then you can't solve that problem. Fundamentally, it's impossible. If you can't say X is a problem because you're not allowed to say X, then that problem continues to fester because you can't name it, right? You can't address it at all. And so censorship is a big problem in a democracy, as you'd expect, right? You'd think. And so if censorship is a big problem in a democracy, then you would think that democracy would fight to protect that kind of thing. You'd think humans in representative roles of democracy would fight to protect that kind of thing, but you'd be wrong. You'd be wrong because humans are very flawed. And we fall for things that sound good, but are actually not all that good. And so Richard Stengel, this is a whole little video, and Elon Musk responds to this, but we need to listen to some of this. It's important. The guy's question at the end, which he does not answer, is incredible. And Richard Stengel, the guy who's talking, is the founder of the State Department's Global Engagement Center, GEC. He describes his job as chief propagandist. Okay, fair enough. I'm not against propaganda, he says. Every country does it. Huh? They have to do it to their own population, and I don't think that's awful. What? Yesterday I told you that the government spent $140 million on ads, the highest number ever spent outside of an election year. Pretty wild. And only half of it was on COVID messaging. So soft-headed people, soft-headed because they don't have their defenses up, right? You're walking around, if you don't have a breastplate and defenses up, then you're soft-bodied, right? Soft-headed people, no defenses up, soft-headed. And so they're listening to news articles and newspapers that have all been paid for in this out of this advertising pot. And everybody understands that it's advertising except for the person who's listening to it and believes it is fact. It's very interesting. Propaganda, every country does it, right? Elon Musk responds, he says, wow, Stengel is explicitly stating that GEC is deceiving the American public. That's what propaganda means. What he forgot to mention is that GEC was used to sway the US elections. And so this is another, I often talk about how I don't think our elections are above board or legit. The reason I don't think that is because in addition to ways to directly impact the votes, we had 200,000 votes not counted. And that's a big deal last election. In a direct impact of votes like that, in addition to that, you've got soft ways to influence people. Google, people being, I mean, I was running in an election where Twitter removed my ability to be on Twitter due to coordinated attacks on me. That's wild, right? Like that's pretty wild. So propaganda, these things used to sway elections. I don't think that our elections are above board for these many reasons. And how you fix that, jeepers creepers. It's a big can of worms. Anyway, here's this exchange. It's a little bit, it's medium long, but it's worth it. Here we go.
To joke as the chief propagandist job. We haven't talked about propaganda. Propaganda, I'm not against propaganda. Every country does it, and they have to do it to their own population. And I don't necessarily think it's that awful. And this idea of a news cartel. I mean, I was editor of Time in 2012 during that election, and I remember, you're competing against cartels and everybody. I remember being on a panel with the then editor of the New York Times, who said it's really hard to break through these days. This is the editor of the New York Times saying it's hard to break through. I wanted to jump off the platform. Like, what's it like for the rest of everybody? So I mean, there are cartels, but cartels don't have hegemony like they used to. The gentleman right there, last question.
I don't think you all address the issue in terms of understanding what happened in the world. Because what is happening in America is what the United States flipped on the global south and in the third world, which we live with for many, many years in terms of a master narrative that was and still is propaganda.
You know what? I hate last questions. Don't you? I usually just want to end something before the last question. But at any rate, I want to thank this fantastic panel here today. And I do want to say, I actually think, talk about optimism.
the guy starts giving him the gears here. And not surprisingly, he starts saying, you're not going to answer my question. The master narrative is being put in place and being held up through propaganda, and you're in favor of this. Like, how can you defend that type deal? I'm paraphrasing because I can't quite hear what he's saying, but you can hear that he's upset about being dismissed, and he's rephrasing his question. I just think it's very interesting how easily a crowd is swayed by a couple of people clapping, and, people just, oh, well, I guess maybe next time he'll answer that question, that uncomfortable question. Is it okay to have, he's saying that in Africa and third world countries, there's an overarching master narrative that is propaganda, has been and continues to be propaganda. That's what he said. And do you think that that's where we're going? And in that situation where you're living and responding to pure propaganda from the state or from whoever's your most immediate source of information like that, is that beneficial? Do you think Canada can maintain that level of misinformation, misdirection for a long period of time? I feel like we're slipping into it. I feel like we are. It seems easy. It seems like it would be an easy thing to slip into because people can turn off their brains that way. Here's Marky Walsh, and she says, CBC President Catherine Tate accuses conservatives of inciting attacks on CBC, saying there's a lot of CBC bashing going on, somewhat stoked by the leader of the opposition. I think they feel that the CBC is a mouthpiece for the Liberal government. They are a mouthpiece for the Liberal government. It's interesting. The CBC has been sued by the Conservative Party of Canada a few times for doing this, and they've lost a few times as well for attacking them, for misrepresenting them. I don't have an example of. Hold on, let me see if I can find one. I'm glad I looked it up. It was actually CBC was suing the CPC, so the broadcasting company was suing the Conservative Party over use of CBC footage in their election advertising. So they had to spend time and money during an election campaign to address a lawsuit from the CBC. Isn't that wild? So they're weaponizing the CBC in more than one way, and now they're using the head of the CBC to attack the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. So that's pretty interesting. Polyev responds. He says CBC's overpaid president and CEO is not even pretending to be unbiased. She launched a partisan attack against me, proving my claim that the $1.2 billion corporation is a mouthpiece for Justin Trudeau. Sign up here to help me go around them. So you can sign up if you're interested in that. I still feel like that's not the solution. That's not going to solve the problem. Unfortunately, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm pleasantly surprised that, oh man, I didn't know that he'd sweep out everything bad about blah, blah, blah. I hope I'm wrong, but because that would be good for Canada, right? And be good for everybody, really, I think. But I'm not holding my breath. I'm not holding my breath at all. Here's Jonathan Kay, and the CBC is moving to online content only. So here's this part of the interview that was with the Globe and Mail that I just showed you. Jonathan Kay pulls this out. In an interview with the Globe and Mail, Catherine Tate, president and CEO of the CBC, said the broadcaster is eventually preparing to shift all its content to online only in order to remain relevant. And Holly Doan says to compete with those online news outlets that do not receive subsidies. And I said, think about it in the context of C11. CRTC will take your website and then redirect the traffic to CBC. So if you had a bunch of traffic going to a bunch of different pages on your website, CBC or CRTC will say, it's pretty white supremacy.
Perhaps interesting.
Very white supremacy, and we don't like that. So we'll take all of those, and we'll take the traffic too, right? This seemed a little loud, so I'll turn this down a little bit. Here she's talking about, and this is censorship, but it's also healthcare. Sometimes I try and use bridging topics, but this wasn't important enough to be the first one for healthcare. But it's interesting, censorship, healthcare. Here we go. She's talking about how third world countries, or some third world countries, other countries around the world, focused on not using science or educating their citizens, but using other opportunities to get citizens vaccinated. And she's trying to underline here how misleading the public, how effective it was to not tell the public about the science, but just to have the goal of getting them vaccinated. Very effective, she says. So Wolsund says, this is a war on the public. I just wanted you to see the mentality of the people who are doing this. It doesn't matter what you want or what you think. They're doing their best to engineer the response they want by their actions. They know that, oh man, there are games you can play where you ask people questions like what color is a picket fence, and you say white, and you say, what does a cow drink? And then the person says milk. I'm getting it totally wrong, but you can prep your mind to get an answer that you know to be wrong, because of course a cow drinks water. But you'll say it anyway, right? And you can be kind of hijacked like that. And that's what they're doing with these responses, these ways to influence people. They're just trying to go around your consent and hijack your brain to get you to do what they want. And then once you've done what they want, well, they don't care after that. Here's her talking about the success they've had without talking about science. Here you go.
Two of the countries which were most successful in getting good coverage of vaccination based this not at all on getting their citizens to try and understand the science. One is Bhutan, where they were very successful in preparing a campaign and involved. They asked, they were sensitive to the country's needs, to the citizens' needs, involved in informing the religious establishment, and in fact using them in finding the right time and date. And they got fantastic coverage. No science was explained. The other example I know of is Portugal, where the campaign was handed to a retired army general. And the army general just treated the country as his troops, and he rallied the troops. He declared it as a war that the country, in patriotic passion, was going to fight together. And they had up there, I think they were leading in Europe, if not the world. So, no science. Let's remember that.
Let's remember that, everyone. No science was necessary to influence that population. Just a war cry, right? Get them all on board. It didn't work in here. We weren't on board with the war cry. We weren't on board. We were okay with banging pots and pans for hero healthcare workers and things until the hero healthcare workers pointed out the hospitals were empty and they were all doing TikTok videos of ridiculous dance routines, and people thought, what's going on here? Hey, hold on a second. It's a wonder we didn't all wake up then, right? No, we all put masks on. Oh, no, let's put the mask on to go to the grocery store. Let's wash all our fruit. It's an insane thing to have lived through, everyone. It is an insane thing to have lived through. I hope Western society isn't one of those things where you wake up and say, we did live through that. We did have cars. We were able to drive down the road to Toronto and go to Canada's Wonderland and fly on planes to go visit family in other parts of the world. We did that. That was real. I'm not imagining that. It can disappear, right? Like we lived through one of the most insane periods in time, and I don't think they're done yet. I think that was just a warm-up. So I hope I'm wrong. Hello, everyone. Thanks for watching. Check out CanadaPoly.com or CanadaPoly2.locals.com for full episodes of Canada Poly Daily, looking at Canadian politics from a Canadian point of view. Thanks for watching, everyone, and have a wonderful, wonderful